as a college coach, those are some of the issues that you're dealing with. And consequently, you've got to allow for that and be flexible enough that you can solve the problem, not just, get rid of somebody or whatever that might be. But
greetings and salutations, and welcome to the Odd Coaches Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Keith Adams, and with me today for this very special Find the Balance Friday edition is my old boss, Tom Dickman, former head coach at Thomas Johnson High School in Frederick, Maryland, and also the inaugural head coach at Hood College in Frederick, Maryland, and my boss for 8 years. His nickname for us is TD. So TD, how you doing today, man? And thank you for joining us.
Doing good, Keith. Celebrating spring, and got a day off since it's Holy Thursday, and my two grandchildren are going with their parents to visit the other grandparents. So this is an unusual day for me.
Well, man, I am so honored to have the opportunity to talk with you. So in segment one, folks, we're going to kind of go through Coach Dickman's career. Segment two, we'll talk a little bit about his role in the Find the Balance book process. And in segment three, we're going to swap some lies and tell some stories. But first, TD, how did you even get to Thomas Johnson? Got to talk about that before we talk about Hood.
Keith, so I played basketball at Shepherd University in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, back in the late 60s and early 70s. And when I first went to college, I thought I was going to be a math major. Why? I have no clue why I said that. But after my second math class, I knew that was not my calling. And I always liked the coaches that I had in high school. Bob Starkey recruited me to Shepherd, and he was one of the biggest influences of my life. And so I kind of decided on that path it would be, something I'd enjoy doing, and I was excited about it. So I finally graduated, and I had teaching fields in physical education, and of all things, I also had a teaching field in mathematics. So I had to do my student teaching, and Shepherdstown is about a 45-minute drive from Thomas Johnson High School. And it wasn't a situation where you picked where you were going to student teach. They just assigned you. So I get not an email back in those days. I got a regular mail notification that my school would be at Thomas Johnson High School in Frederick, Maryland. I had never been to Thomas Johnson for sure. And the only reason I was ever in Frederick is a lot of times we would travel to Towson or wherever we were having a basketball game from Shepherdstown, and we'd have to go through Frederick. So I remember, my first day of observing to be student teaching at Thomas Johnson, I walked in and really didn't know anybody, just had a name that I was supposed to report to. And I walked into the gymnasium, and it was like, this is the nicest gym I've ever seen, to be honest with you. And so I did my student teaching at TJ. And when I finished that, there were a couple jobs open in Frederick County, and I was offered a couple jobs back in my hometown of Wheeling, West Virginia, and also in Parkersburg, West Virginia. And most of them were teaching mathematics, which I wasn't crazy about, but the closest job I had was to teach in Frederick County and as a physical education teacher. And I was also dating this co-ed at Shepherd that I didn't particularly want to go 5 hours away. So that was probably the biggest reason that I accepted a teaching job in Frederick County. And so I started out as an assistant coach at Thomas Johnson under a legendary high school coach, Jay Jacobs, who, Jay's biggest claim to fame is probably he was a teammate of Jerry West at WVU back in the late 50s and early 60s. But he was a great high school coach, and I learned quite a bit from him as his assistant. And then after my first year as an assistant, he applied for an administrative job. And I applied for his job, and I was fortunate to get it. And we had a really good team coming back. We were good the year before, but the team coming back was really good. And we ended up, no thanks to me, to be honest with you, that we won a state championship the first year I was the head coach. And so that kind of led me to, I really enjoyed what I was doing. We had great kids, great players, and I just tried to, do my best to become a better coach. And secondly, to try to make TJ the best possible high school basketball program it could be. So that's where I started. And I was very contented there. Then the opportunity came up that Hood College in Frederick, which was like 5 miles from my home, went from being a single sex institution of all girls to a co-ed institution in 2002, I believe. And so I had some conversations with the administration at Hood, and, I'm like, we're always going to be pretty good at TJ. And here I am thinking about going to some place with no men and being the men's basketball coach, and a very small elementary school like gymnasium. But
that, to put it mildly.
Yeah, but the administration at Hood, Dr. Volpe, Olivia White, and the athletic director, Gib Romaine, they were just they really wanted to do this right. They wanted to make sure that the basketball program, not necessarily, they weren't looking to win any championships. They just wanted to get male students who would fit into the type of students they already had at Hood. And I had just finished my 30th year. I was coming up on my 30th year where I could get my pension from the State Teachers Association. And I talked to a lot of people. And one of my really good friends was a fellow by the name of Skip Prosser, who was, a lot of people know him as the head coach at Wake Forest, who passed away almost 16 years ago, which is hard to believe. But he and I were really, really good friends. And he was a high school coach who went on to college. And so he and I talked a little bit about this. And finally he says, your early 50s, you've always talked about being a college coach. What's keeping you from doing it? And I'm like, that's probably right. So I took a leap, and fortunately, the first person I hired, or the first two people, were Terry Conley, who was a great player for Thomas Johnson at the University of Richmond, and Tay Hill, who was a great player at Frederick High School, and also the University of South Carolina. Upstate now, yeah. And so we set off on recruiting our first basketball team with no gym, no uniforms, no basketballs, pretty much when we say the ground up, it was definitely from the ground up. But with Terry and Tay, we ended up getting, I think we had 14 players on our first team and had a winning season with no home games. And, I wasn't sure that this was going to work out. But after that first season, I thought, we could get this done with our location, the quality of the school, the number of really good basketball teams, programs, and individual high school players around here. And so we took off from there. And, Terry coached for 2 years, and then he went back to be a high school coach. And then I had to fill that position. I came upon Keith Adams, and he was just what we needed because, Tay was inexperienced. I had coached for 30 years, but we needed somebody that had the experience, like Terry was. And so you came along with us in that, I think it was our third year.
Third year, sir.
We had a really good recruiting class. At that point, we weren't eligible for anything. Yeah. The only thing we were eligible for is to go to somebody's holiday tournament. We probably played in about 8 of them a year. And we always played the host team the first night. And I didn't understand why that was. And then I eventually got the clue. And I knew we were doing something right because in the third year, we weren't playing the host team in those tournaments anymore. And in the fourth year, after our, really good recruiting class of, a couple of Montgomery County players, a couple of local players, we ended up being our first year in a conference, in the Capital Athletic Conference, and we ended up being the regular season champions. And the Capital Athletic Conference. And from there, we received an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. We got a first round tough game, down in Virginia Beach, but we played well, lost a tough game. And, I ended up being the coach probably for, 14 years. And then I spent a few years as athletic director. And so that's basically, my basketball experience. And I've always prided myself in being able to pick the kind of players that, they may not have been the most talented all the time, but they fit a certain, they wanted what was best for the team. And I consequently, when I picked Tay and Terry and you and any other coaches, I knew that you were a good fit for the kind of people that we were recruiting or wanted to recruit. And obviously, you had so much success as a high school coach that, I knew that wasn't going to be an issue.
Well, I tell you what, you undersell the success you had at TJ. Was it 7 state championships, sir?
It was 7, yeah. A lot of people think it should have been 8 or 9, but.
Well, my old boss, Walter Hardy, thinks it should have been 6, but that's okay. But one of the things that I often give you credit for is your ability to judge not only high school players to fit your program, but coaches who fit not only what you wanted, but what Hood wanted. And Hood's a highly academic school. You need a 3.0 and a grand to just walk through the doors. And it was so special to see how many of those players over the years. And I did do the math, and we had a 90% college graduation rate, often with people who were first-time 4-year school people
Right.
and their families.
First generation
College folks. So again, this is an opportunity to celebrate the great work that you and a lot of people did. And I'm just so happy you let me kind of be a part of that. So I want to thank you for that.
In retrospect, when we talk about the guys that we had on our teams and where they are today, it's pretty amazing. A lot of them have taken their basketball to a professional career, either coaching or some form of coaching. And most of them are successful in whatever
they're doing.
Decided, yeah. And it's good to see them again. It's good to hear from them. And you're right. With you and Tay and the other people, we had good people, and we knew that they understood the priorities when they came to a Hood college. They wanted to play basketball, but they knew that was probably secondary to going to class, doing assignments, and all the things that most college students take for granted.
All right. And we'll talk more about that in segment 3. But in segment 2, we get to talk about how TD helped me with my doctoral journey. It's really odd, folks. We'll be right back on the Odd Coaches Podcast.
Why should student athletes use the CKA SAVE Project academic and athletic consulting services? Over the past 15 to 20 years, colleges, universities, professional sports teams, business organizations, and others have increased their use of consulting services to improve their decision-making processes and results. Over the same time, the athletic and academic landscape has changed for high school and college student athletes as the NCAA has raised initial academic eligibility requirements for student athletes while decreasing the number of transfer restrictions. Former college student athletes have noted that they were academic and athletically unprepared for the rigors of college. Let the CKA SAVE Project's close to 30 years of academic and athletic experience help guide student athletes to increase success as we work to help student athletes achieve the goal of obtaining a college degree. For more information, contact Dr. Keith Adams by email at cka@ckasaveproject.org.
Welcome back to the Odd Coaches Podcast in segment 2. Man, I get the opportunity to publicly thank TD. So one of the things that Coach Dickman did for all of us, because I worked in the school system and never stopped working there, is just the way we did business. So our players are often on the road. As you know, we didn't have a home gym for a while. And when we did, we still had to travel a lot. So we got Wi-Fi on the bus. So although the players were a little upset about that. Being able to tell the professors, no, these young scholars can finish their work. They have Wi-Fi on the bus, I think helped increase our graduation rate. Both Tay and I worked, so he got that for us too, so we could do our jobs. I'm grading papers in the front of the bus. But TD, I want you to talk a little bit about how you did practice scheduling. One of the things that you did and instituted, and I wish other colleges and universities would do this on a larger scale, is you got everybody's schedule first, and you did practice around their class schedule. Can you talk a little more about how you came up with that idea to really maximize their academic time?
Keith, I'd like to take credit for that, but as a high school coach, I was used to practicing every day at prime time at 3 o'clock or whatever. And at a small school like Hood, their students are in class from 8 in the morning till 9:30 at night. So where does that leave you to practice? And basketball it's not an individual sport where you can go practice the long jump and somebody else come in 15 minutes later and practice the high jump. We had to have every member of our team there to make sure that everybody was on the same page. And so, as you said, I would have their class schedules before the semester started. And it was a little more difficult in a sport like basketball because we had 2 semesters to do this through. And, sometimes we would practice at 6 o'clock in the morning so they could get out of practice to get to class, because between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock at night, nobody was free, or not enough of them were free. So we would practice at odd hours. I can remember so many nights where we would start practice at 9 p.m. We were starting then. And you were coming from Montgomery County, it was even worse for you. And the players, they like 9 p.m. I mean, they're just, that's midway through their day, it seemed like. Me, I was like dragging at 9 p.m. a lot of times. And I'll be honest with you, at 9 p.m. practice, and it still goes on today, that was one of the things that probably drove me out of coaching. I was just getting too old for that. But consequently, none of our players ever had an excuse for missing class. They couldn't say, "Oh, we got practice." That just never happened. And we talked about priorities and academics, even when we were recruiting, between the parents and the basketball player, the student athlete. We made sure that they knew that we were serious about them graduating from Hood College. And as you said, I think having that as kind of like a backbone of how we did things paid off. We weren't 100% of graduation, but we were pretty daggone high, especially, as you say, when I look back at Darnell Edmonds and some of those guys, I mean, they just, somebody should do a story on those guys, where they came from and where they ended up. And they could have given up, a long time before they graduated. And man, they just stuck it out and proved people wrong.
And I'm glad you brought up Darnell, because one of the things that I was proudest of, not only of you, but of Darnell, was your flexibility as a coach. Darnell had internships where he would take the MARC train to New York and we would adjust the practice schedule. And sometimes he would meet us at games because he played for you as a high school player, played for you as a college player. None of his teammates had an issue with any of that, because it was about making sure that he was good and that we were good. And now he's super successful as well. But that's just another example of how we found a great balance. And you allowed me an opportunity to tell at least part of our story in my book, Finding the Balance. And just watching this and growing from this and seeing that, man, you can do both, and you can do both well, and you can win. To see that and be a part of that was just awesome. And I definitely wanted all of us to get our flowers.
When I think back on it, like I had never recruited before. I wasn't a college coach before. And I didn't know really what I was getting into. A lot of things I did in particular was just trial and error. If something worked, I did it again. If something was a little shaky or, didn't work, I just threw it out and we moved on. I'm not talking about basketball wise so much, but, flexibility. I wasn't real flexible when I was a high school coach, but, as you said, there are different areas that you got to be concerned with. I never worried about what was going on in the dormitory at Thomas Johnson High School, but as a college coach, those are some of the issues that you're dealing with. And consequently, you've got to allow for that and be flexible enough that you can solve the problem, not just, get rid of somebody or whatever that might be. But yeah, we were, we did some good things, but a lot of it, I had screwed it up many times before we got it right.
Well, look, we're going to take this opportunity to take a break. And then when we come back, we're going to get some advice from TD. We're going to get his thoughts on the current state of college athletics and maybe some other advice on this special edition of Find the Balance Friday on the Odd Coaches podcast.
The high school and college academic and athletic landscape is changing. The growing number of college transfers, as well as student athletes being able to profit off the use of their name, image, and likeness, has given student athletes the freedom and power to make life-changing decisions. That is why it is important for student athletes to be properly informed throughout the decision-making process. The difference between success and failure is often measured not by yards, but by inches, and even the most successful coaches and players use outside independent consultants to help improve their decision-making, which improves their results. That is what the CKA Save Project would like to do for student athletes across the country, improve their academic and athletic results. Our academic and athletic consulting services assist student athletes with the college decision-making process. The CKA team of former high school and college coaches can provide student athletes an independent assessment of their academic and athletic skills to assist student athletes in their college decision-making process. Let the CKA team evaluate your academic and athletic ability to assist you in finding the right fit for your academic and athletic career. For more information, visit us on the web at www.ckasaveproject.org or schedule a free virtual consultation with Dr. Keith Adams by email at cka@ckasaveproject.org.
Welcome back to the Odd Coaches podcast in segment 3. I'd like to get the boss's thoughts and ideas about the current state of college basketball. Many people don't know, but Tom, you are still the color commentator for Hood College basketball, so you get to see a lot of basketball, even to this day. Tell me what your thoughts are on the current state of college basketball.
Keith, I think I would have a really difficult time coaching today. Maybe not, like we talk about, we adjust, but between the NIL, the transfer portal, all those things happening, what it is to spend your time recruiting somebody and they, you're rewarded with, they come and, they don't, they're not a starter right away. And, in today's world, that player is going someplace else. They don't stay long enough to get the benefits that everybody sees for them. So that would bother me a whole lot. I still think, and again, we're talking about Division III versus Division I. Division I is just a completely different ballgame. But in Division III, there's still that, people transferring all the time. And, I guess that's good. You just got to be able to deal with it. But, I think most of us would like to, I'd say, let's take the University of Maryland. If you have a freshman point guard, you'd like to see how that particular player develops over 4 years, not at Maryland and freshman year and at Southern Cal the second year and Northwestern the third year. It's hard for a fan base to identify with players like that.
Well, I got to tell you, one of the things that I wanted to address with you is the trust you had in your assistant coaches. Talk a little bit as we give young coaches advice on your thoughts behind that. And one of the things that, I totally appreciate in my own career was we had meetings collectively, all of us. And in those meetings, we talked about whatever we were looking for, whatever we were trying to do. And then you would let us go out and try to bring that in. And one thing you told me once was, you're not going to bring in a player that's going to make us bad. So
Yeah.
talk to me about the trust you had in your coaching staff. And I got to sit next to you for 8 years, like literally right next to you.
Well, I was never looking for a yes man, as they said. I wanted, and I was a student of the game from probably my sophomore year in college. I mean, I was like, if I'd have been a chemistry student like that, I'd have probably invented something. But I was not into anything nearly as much as I was coaching basketball, and I learned from other people, and I really observed other teams and other coaches, and that's why I felt good hiring, especially Terry Conley and you, who had been a head coach, and I never had a doubt about Tay Hill. It was just a matter, he was a little, still quote unquote wet behind the ears, but I just knew he was going to be a great coach, and I wanted my coaches to coach, and in games, you and Tay would bounce ideas off of me, and and definitely I needed that. I think every coach needs that. One of my favorite games that I can remember is back, we were playing a huge conference game at Marymount, and I was being my saintly self, and the officials asked me to leave like midway through the second half, and we were down, I don't know, we were down 7, 8, 9, I don't remember how many points. And so I exited the gym, went outside. It was like 25 degrees. Couldn't get back on the bus, couldn't get back in the gym. But Tay Hill and Keith Adams pulled that game out. How, I don't know, with a great second half. And I thought to myself, I ought to get kicked out a little more often, because it seemed to play better when I'm not around screwing things up. But we had a lot of memories like that. And what do you remember from coaching most? Well, I think all of us will say, well, maybe the bus trips to here and coming in the locker room after this game with an upset, and just the players that you have the opportunity to coach, how they do, and seeing them, years later, and maybe seeing their children. But, again, if you're not winning, it's not a whole lot of fun. But with that being said, we had our share of good times.
Yes, indeed. And speaking of that, you'd mentioned Skip Prosser in the first segment, and one of my favorite memories of you and just who you are as a person, and how you love and care about people, and you love on people. We were in the Final Four, and I think it was San Antonio. I'm thinking it was San Antonio. And as you said, you don't stay out late a lot. And you had said, I don't know why we were together, but you had said, man, Skip asked me to go out. And I'm like, Coach, go on out there and have a good time. And you guys drank it up and had a good time. And unfortunately, we lost Skip a few months later. And it was one of those reminders that, you know what, enjoy the moment.
Yeah.
Tell people you love them. Tell people you care about them. And you did that with your players. You did that with us. And there's not a time that we don't see each other, that we don't express, how much we love and care for each other. And, I wanted to, say that to you as well. I do appreciate it. And thank you for coming on with us, boss. I really do appreciate it.
Keith, like I said, I stole a lot of things from other coaches. And I think, and I've said this before, because my TJ guys, we get together every summer, and we've got like, guys that are now in their 30s and guys now mid 60s. So that's and you'd think they were all on the same team, because we just have a great time. But I remember you using the word love to me, maybe, or some players. And I tell my players every summer now, I'm not this guy that I make sure, I tell them every summer, make sure you tell people you love them, and let them know you really feel like that. And that wasn't me probably 20 years ago. So I think I've progressed thanks to people I've been around like you and a lot of others. So, and it's a pleasure being on your podcast.
We appreciate it. So On behalf of my tag team partner, Coach Mike Francis, and you guys had some battles, I'm Dr. Keith Adams saying thank you for listening and or watching the Odd Coaches podcast, and we will see you on the sidelines. Till next time, take care.
The Odd Coaches podcast is sponsored by the CKA Save Project. The CKA Save Project is an industry leader in providing student-athlete academic and athletic support. From assessing student-athletes' academic and athletic skills, to measuring and monitoring student-athlete academic progress, to improving student-athlete time management and organizational skills, the CKA Save Project provides wraparound services for student-athletes from middle school through college. For more information, visit us on the web at www.ckasaveproject.org or schedule a free consultation with Dr. Keith Adams by emailing cka@ckasaveproject.org. We hope you enjoyed today's show. The Odd Coaches podcast drops new episodes every Tuesday through Friday on most weeks. Make sure you subscribe to the Odd Coaches podcast on Apple Music, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Spotify, and YouTube. Follow the Odd Coaches podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Odd Coaches. Follow Dr. Adams on Twitter and Instagram at CKA Save Project. In addition, follow Coach Mike Francis on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Franchise, spelled Coach Franchize. For more information about the CKA Save Project, please visit them on the web at www.ckasaveproject.org. See you next time on the Odd Coaches podcast.